This program was produced by and first broadcast on Radio Kidnappers, a community access media station. Thanks to New Zealand On Air for making this type of programming possible.
Hi, Andrew Austin here, and welcome to my show, Austin On Air, right here on Radio Kidnappers, the voice of Wolf Bay. My guest today is Alwyn Corban, who has recently been elected to the Hastings District Council. Good morning, Alwyn, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Alwyn, after all these years in the wine industry and business, why did you decide to run for the Hastings District Council now?
I decided to run because, well, a couple of people put the idea into my head, and then the more I thought about it, I decided to run. I thought I could make a contribution.
Yeah.
I've got the experience over 45 years living at Hawke's Bay, and I thought I could make a contribution, particularly for the Heritonga Ward, which is horticulture, goes from Ngatawa Road to the coast, Tiawanga, Hamawana, and from the Tūtaikuri River down to Pakipaki. So my business experience has been in Heritonga.
Yeah.
Currently there was no one representing that horticultural sector at council. There was a vacancy, so I thought I could make a good contribution there.
Because if my sums are correct, you're 67 years old, and most people are sort of ending their careers at that sort of age. Do you really want the hassle of public service and sort of bureaucracy and that in your life at this stage?
Well, I'm not regarding it as a hassle.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. And 67, I think 67 today is different to 67 in my father's generation.
Yes. It's 47 or 37 even.
I was going to say 47, but I thought I wouldn't.
Yeah. Now, were you surprised that you were elected? I mean, I actually, personally, I wrote an article. I picked your election, but many felt that there were other candidates that might get that second seat in the ward alongside Anne Redstone. Were you surprised?
Well, I had no idea how it would go.
Yeah.
We don't do polls, we don't do this, we don't do that. A lot of people said to me, I'd vote for you if you're in my ward.
Yeah.
So that was no indication either.
Yes.
So really, was I surprised? No, I wasn't surprised, but I wouldn't have been surprised if it went the other way either.
Okay.
As you say, there were good candidates who have been in the district for a long time and campaigned hard as well. So I'm not surprised, but I wouldn't have been surprised if one of the others had have beaten me as well.
Yeah. Now, I understand that you were encouraged to run by the Hastings Mayor, Sandra Hazelhurst. And do you believe this will mean you'll be beholden to her on council?
No, I'm not beholden to anyone.
Yeah.
I'm an independent.
Yeah.
I'm not there with an agenda of I've been wanting this to be done for the last 15 years and no one's done it. I'm not there on that basis. I think I'm open in that regard and will act as an independent.
So if it came that you had to vote against her, the Mayor, Sandra Hazelhurst, on an issue, you would feel quite comfortable doing that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. As I say, I'm an independent, and I'll vote how I think I should on particular issues.
Yeah. Now, who funded your election campaign, and have you made any promises to any election interest groups, if you like?
No, I funded it myself.
Okay.
And no promises.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, you mentioned that you didn't feel there was anyone representing the horticulture industry and that. So what were the other sort of issues and reasons you stood?
Well, I think in the Heritonga ward, a key issue is, I think there's 3 or 4 issues. One is urban creep and protecting the productive land. Another one is the right to farm and being able to carry on farming. Another one is just environmental stewardship and making sure that there's responsible environmental stewardship in the Hiratonga ward. And of course, housing and RSE housing, how it fits into the whole housing strategy of council is an important one as well.
Yeah, you've raised some interesting questions there, and that whole issue of urban creep is, it's quite a fine balancing act, if you like, because, we do need houses, but also we've got this rich, fertile soil. So what, as a general sort of rule, do you think is the way to go there?
Well, I've got to get up to speed with where council's at with that, and particularly with it's full of acronyms, HPUDs,
yes.
And just what's in there before I can comment. But in general principle, the land has to be protected, and we have to find housing development that doesn't encroach on it.
Yeah, and now you mentioned...
just as an aside, I was up in Bay of Islands in September for celebrating 200 years since the first grapevine was planted in New Zealand by Samuel Marsden at Kirikiri, and we were staying at Waitangi. We were taken on a charter bus to Kirikiri, and we had a guide talking us all the way over. And as soon as we got onto Kirikiri, he was really labouring the point about the fertile land and what's made Kirikiri the citrus place that it is, etc. Going into housing and car parks, and he was lamenting the fact. So it's not an issue just in Hawke's Bay, it's everywhere.
Yeah, and you touched on also one of the points about the environment and that, and obviously these days climate change is a big issue and even affecting councils and how they do their business. And in your ward, obviously we've got that Hamoana and all that area there where we've seen a lot of coastal erosion. How do you plan to, as a ward councillor, tackle those issues?
Well, I have to get up to speed on that. Yeah. I know there's been the Clifton to Tuangoyo coastal strategy put forward. I don't quite understand where each of the councils are on it.
Yeah.
I think funding is going to be the major issue with it, and I'll just have to see how that goes, see what each of the councils say about it and what the recommendation is. As a councillor, I'd expect to get a report saying what the background is and what the recommendation is and why.
Yeah. So you believe climate change is a man-made phenomenon and should be an issue that we address?
I think man is accelerating climate change. I think climate change has been there, but I think it's been accelerated by the way we've lived over the last 150 years.
Yeah. Okay, and just obviously the next big issue one of the big issues in Hawke's Bay is water, and we had the Havelock North water poisoning, if you like, or crisis. And do you think enough's been done from what you've seen and that to address this issue?
Well, first of all, I was a victim of the gastro outbreak. I actually dined in Havelock North and succumbed to the gastro bug, and I did think I was going to die. But it was, So is enough being done? I think the first thing is we actually need safe water, and Hastings District Council has invested a lot in delivering safe water. But when you get into the chlorine argument, I'm not sure where that goes. What else has to be done? I'll have to get up to speed with that.
So what is your personal view on the chlorination of the drinking water supply?
Well, personally I prefer it to be unchlorinated, but whether it's practical or not is a different question.
Yeah. Do you think we've been a little bit naive to think that we can just sink a hole in the ground and out will come gushing this beautiful pure water that we can all drink?
I think to regard it as simply as that is naive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you believe it's about also the delivery system and getting that up to speed?
Yes, it's actually
infrastructure.
It's that, and it's also the monitoring and making sure that what's coming out of the ground is potable, and what is delivered down the pipes is potable. But just to put a bore down and pump it up and reticulate it and assume everything's going to be okay is naive.
Yeah. Now, on the issue of transparency on council, what is your view on that, and would you support any sort of, are you in favour, should I say, of the whole publicly excluded portions of meetings where public are told to get out so council can discuss business? What is your view on that?
Personally, I think having public excluded parts of meetings are important. I feel that if everything is open to the public, there may not be as deep and as honest debate as there would be if it was publicly excluded.
Where do you draw the line? Because the ratepayers are the people that are that elected you, really.
Yeah, but they elected me to do a job. They didn't elect me to monitor me every day and every minute and every sentence I say.
But if they don't hear what job you're doing and can't see what job you're doing, how can they know that you're doing the job?
Well, they will see the results of what happens at council. I think that's where they get their say every 3 years.
So where's the line that you would draw? What should be in PX meetings and what should be open to the public, just as a general rule?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that because I haven't been to a full council meeting and I haven't been part of the discussion.
Fair enough, fair enough.
And I don't know what the current practice is in terms of what's said in council and what's said out of council. Yeah.
Now, there have been a few rocky times over the last few years on council. What is your view? I don't know if you've been up to speed on the whole Water Central issue and the decision by the council to hire or get an investigation to find out who leaked information to the media. What's your view on that?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I can understand it from the point of everyone around the council table and whether people are thinking that they were the leaker.
Yeah.
And in some ways it'd be great just to be able to wave the wand and carry on.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually solve suspicion or whatever. All I can say is I think it's important that the council rebuilds as a team, and with trust and confidence in each other, and works together and moves on.
Because you're going to be one of a few new councillors that are going to be coming in, which into a situation where there might still be quite a bit of tension there. How will you deal with that personally in terms of reaching out to everyone? I
take people as I find them.
Yeah.
I haven't prejudged anyone.
Yeah.
So I'll just continue to do that.
Now, another thing that was quite contentious was the whole Tomato track, Craigie Range track, if you like.
Yeah.
What are your views on whether it should have been allowed to go ahead and the process, and then the whole sort of undoing of it, if you like?
Well, I think there should have been better consultation in the first place, and we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation that we are. The fact that there wasn't means it happened, and we've had to undo it, etc., etc. So that's done. We can't change that.
Yeah, because it's, a lot of money's been spent and a lot of council money. Are you comfortable with all the money that's been spent on it?
I think when something's not right, it's got to be fixed, and there's got to be healing before you move forward, and sometimes that costs money.
Yeah. Now, obviously, your background is wine, as you've mentioned, and it's an important part of the wine industry. Is quite an important part of our economy here in Hawke's Bay. How are things looking at the moment? Because generally our economy seems to be bubbling on quite nicely. What are your views on that?
Hawke's Bay has always got great potential in wine. I don't think we've realised our full potential. But we are a determined industry and resilient. I think it's great potential. This year there's a bit of a setback with that hail.
Yeah.
A couple of months ago or a month ago.
And so do you think that's going to have an impact on the harvest and on the...
I think it will, on the volume.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And now you've got quite an interesting backstory. I think it was your great grandfather coming over from Lebanon, and do you want to just tell us about that? It's quite a good story, that.
Yeah, my great grandfather came from Lebanon. There was civil war in Lebanon from about the 1860s to 1890s. And he waited until both his parents passed away before he left. He was married, he had one child and another one on the way. And he was at the wharf for 3 months trying to find a ship. I think he originally wanted to go to South America, but the first ship he could get on went to Australia. And he went to Australia for 6 months and then came to New Zealand. So he was an immigrant, couldn't speak English, with no family support, and he made a living hawking around the goldfields, particularly around Thames Coromandel. And Lebanese law said if you and your wife were apart for 7 years, that was grounds for divorce or whatever.
Yeah.
So just after 6 years, his wife joined him, and of course the 2 sons that were born in Lebanon. When she came, he established himself as in Queen Street with a shop for 4 years, and then moved out to Henderson, where he had bought land next to the railway line, which was orchard and vineyard. And it was the vineyard that really grew. And they grew that business. They had another 8 children in New Zealand, and it was a big family business that grew, and Corban's became a leading wine company in New Zealand, and the biggest wine company in New Zealand until the family sold it in the 70s. So my grandfather was born here. My grandmother was born in Lebanon, and they met in New Zealand and married. My father was born here. My mother, interestingly enough, her family have a connection to Hawke's Bay because her grandfather was a manager of Ulrich Station, and her father was actually born at Kiraroo at Munkatahi. So Mum was Kiwi, Dad was Lebanese.
So, but your connection and roots to Hawke's Bay are quite extensive then?
Well, we always talk about my dad's lineage and the Lebanese, but I've just started to think recently I've actually got strong Hawke's Bay roots as well.
Yeah, now you personally have had quite a history. You were saying 45 years or so in the industry and that. So just tell us a bit about that and what companies you've been involved. Were you ever involved in Corban's, or was that sort of after your time?
No, I just worked at Corban's as a student, holiday jobs, etc. I studied at Auckland Uni and then Massey Uni, but I went to California and did my winemaking studies.
Oh, yeah.
Worked in Australia, came back, worked for McWilliams in Napier for 4 years, and then when I was at Davis in California, everyone was starting their own winery, and that was the ambition, etc. That was really what you wanted to do. So I had that in my head when I came back, and I was fortunate enough to meet Gary Glazebrook, and the Glazebrook family out at Bridgepa, formed a partnership with them and established Natara Wines on their family land.
Yeah. And
that was 1981.
Okay, and since then?
Well, I was at Natara from then until 2017.
Yeah.
We sold the brands to Mission.
Yeah.
And 6 months ago we sold the vineyard and buildings to John Bostock, who's our neighbour.
Okay, yeah.
And John's got a family connection there. His wife Vicky was Vicky Glazebrook.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's all connected, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, the important question is, what makes a good wine?
From a winemaker's point of view or a consumer's point of view?
Either or, both, if you like, yeah.
Well, I think from a consumer's point of view, a good wine is one that meets your expectation at your price point.
Okay.
Yeah. From a winemaker's point of view, a good wine is true to where it comes from, true to the vineyard that it comes from, true to the winemaking style of the winemaker, and true to previous vintages of that label.
Okay. Now, the history of Hawke's Bay, and we've gone through quite a bit with amalgamation and everything or attempted amalgamation, and that failed, and that. In terms of the different councils and that, and I know there was recently a big workshop where all the councils came together. How do you see that working in terms of councils working together, and also what role do you think you can play in making sure there's more sort of cooperation?
Well, one thing that has impressed and perhaps surprised me is the degree of collaboration that is happening within Hawke's Bay. While we don't have amalgamation, councils are definitely talking and working together. And the way I see it is really is think regional but act local. We have to take the benefits of what we can get from working together regionally, but apply it locally rather than broad brush across the whole region.
Yeah. Are there any particular areas that you know about or passionate about that you think where there could be closer collaboration?
Well, obviously the regional council covers the whole area, and all of the district councils and city councils are relating to the regional council. Yeah. So environment is an obvious one in that regard. Yeah. And transport. Yeah.
Now, Sandra Hazelhurst has a style of management where she gives each councillor a portfolio, if you like. Have you had any discussions with her on that? And if so, what has she given you? And what would you like to be focusing on?
I haven't had discussions as yet.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. I'm not sure what she's got in mind for me. I think the economy in Hawke's Bay is important, not in terms of how do we pay for everything, but if we're going to plan for the region, we have to know where the economy is going to be, what it's going to look like, and what we need to resource that sort of economy. You know, how many people are going to live here because of that? What sort of production we're going to have? What sort of business we're going to have? What sort of infrastructure we need? So that interests me. And the social issues in Hawke's Bay interest me as well. You know, we've had a great economy, but we've got some of the worst social deprivation stats in New Zealand, both Napier and Hastings.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's always an interesting issue, because how does the council get involved? Is there just so much that a council can do to uplift the lives of the people that live in the area?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I'd like to see what council is doing at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that council can, because I think the starting point for it all is what's in people's hearts, their attitudes and what they think about their community.
Yeah. And last question, so how long do you think we're going to see you as a councillor? Is it one term, or do you think you'll keep going?
I haven't even been in 3 weeks. And you're asking me what's going to happen in 3 years' time.
Give you a chance, eh? Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Alwyn Corban, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed chatting to you, and all the best in the new role.
Thank you, Andrew.
And to the listeners, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
This program was produced by and first broadcast on Radio Kidnappers, a community access media station. Thanks to New Zealand On Air for making this type of programming possible.